And welcome back. So in this video, you're seeing me continue to work on the vertical stabilizer. Here I am putting the skeleton inside the skin for the first time. So what this is going to entail is wrapping the skin around the skeleton and matching the holes in the skin to those on the skeleton. Sometimes it takes a little finagling for it. The skin is obviously supposed to be tight, so it might be a little difficult at times to get it wrapped just correctly, but it's just a matter of lining up the first hole and then putting a cleco there and moving along. As you put in more clecos, they all start to line up, and it gets a little bit easier. But essentially, we'll go through, put the clecos in every other hole, and set up for match drilling. This is the first time it's really starting to come to shape as an actual part, and so it's kind of interesting when I was putting this together. And as I'm putting in the clecos, some of them are still a little difficult to get into place, but as you do the match drilling and you move the clecos, obviously it gets a little easier. So this becomes, as I've said before, it gets to be a long process setting this up for match drilling, just putting in lots of clecos. And then along the bottom there where I'm working now, there are 6 holes on either side of the vertical stabilizer that you don't drill and you don't dimple. Those are where the fairings, the transition pieces, if you will, from the vertical stabilizer to the horizontal stabilizer and the tail cone itself, that's where that will attach to. So that's something that you'll dimple and drill out later on. The instructions actually have you put tape over those holes just to remind you, hey, don't drill here. And you can see that as I'm putting in some of these clecos, I'm really having to twist and try to maneuver it to get it into the hole there. Some of that may be just from not getting the skin lined up quite as well as I could have, but again, as you put the clecos in, they line up and becomes a little more easy. So now here you turn it over and do the same thing on the other side, and this is where it can get a little more tricky because obviously you've put tension on the skin from clecoing it to the other side. So now you just work your way down the rib and try to pin it in place essentially with the clecos. So to this point, I've created the skeleton, essentially took all the ribs and the forward and rear spars and prepared them for attaching the skin. And here I am putting the 6 pieces of tape to remind myself not to drill or to dimple those specific holes in the skin. But the process is the same for just about every piece, where you prepare the skeleton and cleco everything together to do the match drilling, and then you'll take it apart and do the final preparations before you go for final assembly. So in the skeleton, I've gotten to do some riveting already. The forward spar, there's a plate doubler on the bottom pieces that's sticking out there on the bottom, on the forward end of it, that needed to be riveted in place. And then the rear spar, the long piece at the back there on the left, that's got a plate doubler on it as well that runs about 2/3 of the length of the rear spar, and it's just for added structural support and whatnot. But it required several holes to be match drilled, and even to have some that are countersunk to allow for matching up with the spar itself, the rear spar. And that's one part where I messed up, and I ended up having to reorder that piece, in that I countersunk too deeply on a couple of the holes there. So it took out too much material, and there was no way to recover from that, so I ordered new pieces. So it's a bit of a process, but it does come together faster than what you think. And then all of these holes that I'm clecoing together are 3/32 or number 40 drill bit. And so you put a cleco in every other hole, and then you'll drill each of the holes that are still exposed. And then once you've drilled all those out and done the match drilling for each of those holes, you'll move each of the clecos over one spot and drill the remaining holes. And you'll do it on both sides. So as I'm making these videos, I'm still trying to come up with different ways to make the videos a little more interesting. It's with this one angle, it obviously kind of gets redundant, and especially with how many clecos I have to put in on this skin, it gets to be long. So I've actually started putting in using, I think I mentioned in my last video that I'm using my GoPro as a second angle now, and you'll see that coming up in a couple videos. And hopefully that'll bring in another dimension to what I'm doing to the project, to where you can see close-ups of what's going on. And here I'm taking another opportunity with my professional photographer, my daughter Audrey, and I've also had created a blog to post the progress that I'm making. And so she's helping me with that by helping me take some of the photos to put onto that blog. So that's the completion of fitting the skin. So now I'll go into the process of doing the match drilling, and just a matter of make sure I have the right drill. And like I said, it's a number 40 drill bit. And one of the things you want to make sure is that your drill bits, they will degrade over time with use, obviously. It's aluminum, which is obviously a soft metal, but it's still it dulls the drill bits nonetheless. So I've got several drill bits of each size. Just as this is going to be a 5-year project, I'm going to do a lot of drilling, so I went ahead and bought some extra drill bits to help get through it. So as you're getting your tooling together, there's a lot of discussions about tooling and what to get, what you need to get right away versus what you can get later on. And I like to go with air tools. I think it's an easier way to go about it, and it's not as heavy of a tool. Using the electric drill, when I'm doing the deburring, especially with the hole deburring, it gets heavy. Even the corded drill, it gets heavy. So I opted with the air tools because they are a little bit lighter, and with as much drilling and as much tooling as you're going to use, it's nice to have lighter weight stuff. So that's the way I opted. Does it make any difference? Obviously not. It's a drill is a drill is a drill. It's more of just wearing your arm out from use. So with the exception of deburring, I use the air tools pretty much for just about everything. I've also found that the electric drill, I can get a little bit more control out of it with the modulation of the trigger for it. So I tend to use it for more precise control, I guess. Now here I'm fast forward a little bit. I'm now finished with all the match drilling, and come to the point where now you have to disassemble the vertical stabilizer again. It's fun putting everything together. I wouldn't say it's disheartening, but it kind of feels like you're setting yourself back a little bit each time you take these apart, but it's a necessary part of the process. Obviously, as you drill the holes, you're going to create sharp points, so you have to take everything apart and deburr again, just to make sure that there's no points to where you can start having stress fractures, which is the whole point of deburring. You want to smooth off all the edges, both on the edges of each piece as far as the edge of the metal, on the flanges and whatnot, but also all of the holes that are in the ribs, on the interior side of everything. You want to go through and just make sure there's no sharps. All the holes that you drill, you got to go through and deburr those as well. Any kind of sharp edge can lead to stress fracturing later on through the life of the airplane. So you have to go through and deburr everything. And it's obviously an area you don't want to cut corners. It's significant enough to make sure that you go through and deburr every single piece. So as I take this apart, I'll get everything taken back apart, including the skeleton itself, because drilling into the skin, you also drill into the ribs, so you have to take everything apart and deburr all together. And then after this, I will, once I have everything taken apart, I will apply the primer to the ribs and to the parts of the skin where the ribs attach. Again, I'm not putting primer on every inch of surface on the interior, just only the parts that have a higher likelihood of corrosion, sometime later in life. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and let this video wrap up. Here you see me taking the skeleton out of the skin, and I'll begin disassembly of this in the next set of videos. So again, thank you for watching. Hopefully this will lead to someone gaining interest maybe, and give you an idea of what you may expect for building an RV-14.